Hello, my name is Andrew Smuskiewicz, and welcome to the next episode of the Salvation from Destruction podcast. Our guest today is Tina Sherrow Bayless, a retired senior special agent from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. For over 27 years, Tina served on the front lines of federal law enforcement, specializing in arson and explosives investigations. She's investigated serial bombers, organized crime rings, and major national incidents that captured headlines across America. She was a certified explosive specialist for 2 decades and a trained bomb technician. She's also become a sought-after expert providing analysis on high-profile cases like the 2018 Austin serial bombing. So I would like to welcome to the show retired ATF Senior Special Agent Tina Sherrow Bayless. How are you tonight?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I just want to ask, what drew you to the ATF and how did you discover your passion for explosives?
Well, I would say that I was always interested in the law from the time I was a little kid. Actually wrote an essay in 5th grade. I won a contest to be city attorney for the day, and I won. I'm actually from outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and went to Penn State, where I majored in administration of justice. And then at a career day, met different agents from the various, federal agencies, and thought, oh, this could be a direction I could go because you could be in the field and be active. That appealed to me, and not necessarily maybe tied to a desk, but you still had to know the law. And of the agencies that I spoke with during the career day, ATF actually made me the most nervous. And I thought, I'm not sure I could work with them. They sound like they do dangerous stuff. But as a 22-year-old graduating from college with no prior experience, I was pretty much willing to take a job with anyone that would hire me. And as luck would have it, ATF was hiring, and I was able to get an interview. Interviewed October 5th, was offered the job October 10th, and they had my background done by December 31st, like months later.
That was fast.
It was so fast. So my first day on the job was January 2nd of 1990. So I'm a 22-year-old kid that literally knew nothing, like literally zero about police work, nothing other than my 4-year education. They were willing to take a chance on me, pretty much taught me everything I know, really afforded me opportunities that I might not have had otherwise. So I was really lucky, really blessed that it happened the way it did.
So not having any law enforcement experience whatsoever,
Yeah.
Here you are getting into the ATF to deal with explosives, one of the most dangerous fields that you can get into. What made you decide that you wanted to become a bomb tech and investigate bombing cases?
Well, I think just being at the academy and getting the exposure to the different laws that ATF enforces between the firearms, arson, and explosives laws on the criminal side of the house, the investigations that interested me the most were the arson and explosive stuff. And I think just in part because of the way my brain works in a very linear fashion, that it seemed like detective work. And that was what I wanted to do. Not that the gun cases aren't detective work, because you can really get into some complex firearms investigations as well. My strength, I should say, is not the ability to fly by the seat of my pants all the time. And the arson and explosive stuff was a little more structured, I think, investigatively speaking.
So you were a certified explosive specialist as well, besides a bomb technician. What is the difference between the two roles?
So within ATF, our primary duty as an agent is investigations, and then we have collateral duties. And because of the type of explosive investigations we do, we often seize explosive materials related to those cases. Then we need to be able to do something with those explosive materials in terms of when it comes time to get rid of them. So one of the collateral duties that ATF has is as a certified explosive specialist, or CES as we call it. We are trained to safely handle and dispose of explosive materials. On the regulatory side of the house, ATF regulates the explosives industry, similar to the firearms industry. In that regard, it was important that we knew kind of all facets of how the explosive industry works as well. And then by authority, we also investigate accidents, like explosives accidents that happen, whether they're criminal or not. And then once we determine that it's not a criminal incident, then our job is done at that point. So the CES it's a 2-year program, and we're required to take certain classes to achieve that certification in 2 years. And some of those classes include like how to dispose of explosive materials. ATF created the first advanced explosives destruction techniques course in 2000 based on the statistic that there are actually more bomb technicians killed during disposal operations than they are doing render safe procedures. So a bomb technician, different than a CES, a bomb technician has training and certification in how to render safe a device. So if there's a call to a suspicious package or things that you see in the movie or on TV sometimes, then it's the bomb technician's job to render that device safe and then do the investigation from there. As a CES, I can do everything that a bomb technician can do in terms of disposing of explosive materials. The only thing as a CES that I couldn't do was do an actual render safe procedure. Once I did get the bomb technician certification much later in my career, then that afforded me the ability to be able to do render safe procedures. But our federal authority only went so far as to support the state and local bomb technician in the field than to actually do the render safe procedures. But we could help them in every shape, form, or fashion that if we were at a call with them, we could help them get the bomb suit on, we could help get their tools ready, their x-rays ready to do what they needed to do as well.
Yeah, you were part of a pretty high-profile case that I'm excited to talk about, too. And that case was involving serial arsonist John Vasey. I really want to highlight that case. So can you go ahead and talk about that?
Sure. So it was definitely a team effort, and I can talk about, my part in that, but I was my partner, Jane Balkema, she was the case agent and I was the co-case agent. And our office got a call from the Cary Police Department, so one of our northern suburbs. And there was a detective there that was investigating a residential house fire in Cary. And they felt like it had started under suspicious circumstances. So the house was a rental unit. John Vasey rented it. His wife was rescued from the fire. John Vasey's son, to a previous wife who was deceased, was also rescued from the fire. But John Vasey himself had managed to get out of the house with the youngest toddler that he and his wife had. So a few of the things that did not sit right with the detective, he called asking for some help to investigate the fire. Residential fires, depending on the circumstances, are not within federal purview because they don't affect interstate commerce, except this was a rental unit and they paid rent to a landlord in Arizona. So that does affect interstate commerce. And in fact, it was one of the issues that they appealed the case on, but the court found that it met the requirements for interstate commerce. So we started helping him investigate that case, and also because he had learned that this was not his first house fire. He had had 2 previous house fires and 1 house explosion, and his first wife had died under very suspicious circumstances in Joe Daviess County in Galena, actually. So there was a house explosion and a house fire where they lived in Twin Lakes, Wisconsin. His first wife died under very suspicious circumstances in Galena. Then the third house fire then occurs in Cary. So we kind of have 4 different cases to investigate. And from our position, we were able to paint a big picture by investigating all of those, where each jurisdiction only had the ability to investigate their own piece. So we just started working with each of those individual jurisdictions on the case. I was specifically working on the one in Galena. They'd had the house fire in Galena, and then his wife had also died in that same house at a different time. So I think I'll go right to one particular piece of the case that I think for me sits with me and in my career was he was living with a lady at the time that we were doing the investigation, and we weren't quite ready to arrest him yet. And only to come to learn that she was getting ready to take out some additional life insurance on herself. And we had learned that she already had about $1 million of life insurance taken out on her. And so we got a little nervous that she was his next victim, or that he was considering harming her. And she had 2 little boys also. He preyed on vulnerable women that suffered from maybe low self-esteem issues or other things in their life that he could take advantage of. So the team decided with the U.S. Attorney's Office that we would go talk to her and see if we could get her to cooperate, because we were in fear that she was in danger. And we had a responsibility to tell her that no matter what happened to the investigation, like the investigation wasn't worth her life. So myself and the Joe Daviess County Sheriff's deputy went to her place of employment, sat down with her, and started to talk with her about a few things that we had been investigating, enough that it would get her thinking about these things and whether or not it would resonate with her. But as you might imagine, she was pretty defiant. She's in love with this person and she's literally about to marry him. They were engaged and she just kind of wasn't having it. And didn't want to hear that. So she got up from the table, walk away, and I got up and followed her. And she said, "Why are you following me?" I said, "I know you are going to go call him." I said, "I can't stop you from calling him. I just want you to think about it for a minute and what this all means for you, for your boys, for your future. I have to believe that something is resonating with you." So she sat back down for a few minutes, but then the interview ended shortly after that. So I didn't think we had made an inroad, but she called us a short while later after we left her office and said that she was too afraid to go home. Could we come get her? It started the ball rolling pretty quickly too, as you might imagine, because we had now like just a short window of time to get her. John Basie was supposed to pick up the boys from school that day. So we made arrangements to go scoop the boys out of school. We gave some information to the school that they would tell him once he arrived of why they weren't there, and then made a plan to arrest him on his way home. And that was how we ended up arresting him. And then we did search warrants and we got a ton of evidence related to some of the other fires, things he had claimed lost in the fire that we found, things to that effect. But I do feel like we saved a life that day. So that's a good feeling, I think, as a law enforcement officer, that you always want to know that you've helped somebody in some way, and that the 2 boys, still have their mom, because his first wife, that we proved at trial later that he had killed her, that she didn't just die by natural causes. She left 2 children behind, and they were a big part of our case as well. And her daughter had even testified at trial, and the loss of their mother was very devastating on their lives. And then right before I retired, we had found the first wife's diamond ring that they had claimed lost in one of the fires on the insurance thing. So I was able to give that back to the aunt, and then the aunt was able to return that ring to her daughter. So it's nice when it comes full circle. But so he was pretty diabolical. I want to say it was like 21 counts that we charged him with.
Wow.
Arson it was like a conspiracy, it was a scheme to defraud the insurance companies is what we charged in the federal system. For his first wife's murder, we don't have a murder statute for that in the federal system. So the count 5 was an insurance charge where we still had to prove her death and her murder in support of count 5, which was the insurance money he collected on her life was $250,000. Okay. So in order to prove that count, we had to prove that he had murdered her. So my partner, Jane, she did such an amazing job as the case agent in that, and in interviewing the doctors and the medical people that came in to testify in regard to his first wife's death, because it was staged, and there was this great medical examiner out of Cook County who used to specialize in staged death scenes, and he had done large mass graves nationally. He was a great witness. One of the leading heart doctors in the country that showed why she didn't die of a heart arrhythmia, versus what we thought she had died from. So we The trial was 6 weeks long.
Holy
We had
cow.
about 100 witnesses that took the stand, and 6 weeks for a trial in the federal system is very long. I mean, they're typically only like 1 to 2 weeks at best. So it was emotional at the end. The jury did convict on all counts, and he was sentenced to 110 years for that. So he's still serving time. The time we arrested him, he was only 34 years old.
That's young.
Yeah, he was very young. So he had been doing what he'd been doing in terms of scamming the system for a number of years, and at a very young age of 34. To this day, you think about the victims in the case. The lady that we went to speak with that was living with him at the time that we had to warn, I know that she has passed away from cancer. I hear her 2 boys are doing well, so that's good. But it was really intense to put that case together in a short period of time. But we had such a good team of people, and I would have to give a shout out to the IRS as well. We had this fantastic revenue agent that did all the money for us, because we look at arson for profit, and he was definitely collecting money on all the insurance claims that he made. And he would find these little niche insurance companies that he would file claims with so that nobody would kind of catch it. That's it in a nutshell.
Can you get into some of the evidence that convicted him?
Yeah, so I'll go back to using our fire research lab. The fire science is a really difficult animal to investigate origin and cause of fires. And so one of the things Basie did in these fires were he would tell the investigator or the fire marshal that would respond to the call, he would kind of lead them in a way of how the fire might have started. He just rewired these lights above this 1x8 beam across the thing here. And so the fire marshal had determined the fire in Galena to be an arson, but probably not the right origin. And so our certified fire investigator in our office would review the fire marshal's reports and photographs, and then we would re-interview the fire marshal as to how they arrived at their cause and origin, and ask questions to ascertain whether or not they see anything different or new. And so in that instance, we could see that the futon had actually been set on fire in the corner where the most damage was, versus these little lights setting a 1x8 beam on fire is not going to happen. Fire in Cary, trying to point investigators towards the Christmas tree, and it wasn't the Christmas tree. So that was what we actually used the fire research lab for in ATF, was they were able to recreate the room that the fire happened in, including the Christmas tree. We get the exact same furniture, the exact same everything, like literally recreate that room at the fire research lab. And then they set it up with all of their instruments to test the theory, basically test the hypothesis of how the fire started. And again, we were able to show and prove that the fire didn't start with the Christmas tree. It actually started with the chair in the corner. 2, just that he purposefully left his second wife and his son to the deceased wife in that fire because they had a certain amount of life insurance on that I'm sure he anticipated collecting if they perished. So his second wife and his son to the first deceased wife spent like 7 days in hyperbaric chambers.
So did he knock him out before you started the fire? Did he stab them? Did he kill him? Like what did he do?
Such a good question. You're helping me remember this. It's been so long since I've talked about the case, but yes, he had a history of giving the date rape drug, HHB, to women. So we were able to find some women that he had dated through ads in the paper, and we interviewed a lot of these ladies that had encountered him, and each one of them described this experience they had of him giving them a drink, them getting this tingling sensation, and then nothing, like they're just out. So the wife that was in the Cary fire, she said, he brought me a dish of ice cream, an unusual gesture that he doesn't normally do, and she remembers eating it, and then she's out and on the couch, like just passed out. And then he came up with this elaborate story of how he escaped that fire in Cary by doing this ninja dive out of one of the bedroom windows. Only little did he know that the 80-year-old neighbor across the street was watching him all night, in and out of the house and outside the house with the baby, and never saw him do a ninja roll. That nosy neighbor, nosy elderly neighbor, he was also a really great witness. Yeah, so he was using GHB.
But yet he left his wife in the house. He did the ninja roll out the window and took his baby, but yet he left his wife in the house.
Yes, and both were insured. I wasn't sure if the little baby had been insured yet. I think actually his son to the deceased wife was like $50,000, but I don't think the baby had been insured yet.
So some of his wives lived. Is that?
His first wife deceased, the second wife lives, and then the about to be third wife is the one we went to.
Okay.
To talk to.
Got it. Did you ever get anything from the last wife?
Yes, she did reveal that we had told her enough that the red flags were going off, because we talked about his deceased wife and we talked about the next wife and the things that we knew and the things that she was told by him that were different enough. But then she had revealed that he'd actually talked to her about faking her death at some point and collecting the insurance money, and then he would meet up with her somewhere later. She had been in a terrible car accident. She almost lost her life. She was so sensitive that she had been given a second chance to live. He would prey on that. He would tell her that he would have premonitions about her dying in various ways. He had told coworkers that he knew how to poison people and get away with it. So he really kind of fancied himself kind of a little bit of a Don Juan, so to speak, or would have big wads of cash, but then we could show where he would run out of money and then he'd have an event. He'd collect the money from the insurance, have the money, and then dip down. So it was really easy to show the financial motives that he had. One other thing he tried to do with the first wife before he killed the first wife, they were out on a dinner date one night and he drove the van off into the Apple River and then left the van in the river with her in it and got out and thinking she would somehow perish in the van in the river. So, and then collected insurance money. But again, we had a lot of other good witnesses there, from the tow truck driver that came and hauled the van out and helped the first wife get out up the hill. He said it was a really steep embankment. The repair people, where he claimed the brakes went out, and the repair people were like, these brakes are fine. So a lot of deception, a lot of just bad.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good job on that case. I'm glad you guys put that guy away, because he sounds like just a terrible human being.
We were all very glad that it worked out the way it did.
That's good. That's good. But the other case I wanted to talk to you about was the mob bombing involving Michael Sarno in Berwyn, Illinois. So I know that's an interesting case too that you work. Can you tell us about that as well?
Yeah, a little bit. I would say I never thought I'd have another big case like that Vasey case, but then along came, it was a bombing happened of a store in Berwyn. It was a storefront, but it was related to the video gambling devices. So the video gaming machines that you play in the restaurants, bars and stuff, they were still illegal. They're legal now in Illinois, but at the time they were illegal. So the bombing happens in February of 2003, like 1 a.m. on a storefront on 16th Street. And the Berwyn Police Department calls, and it was around probably like 3 a.m. at that time. So we were able to have them secure the scene, wait until daylight. So we get there at like, 6 or 7 a.m, but it's literally the coldest day of the year. It was like 30 below, as you can imagine. And it was freezing, just absolutely freezing. I had my Iceman boots on. So like for up to 40 below, we still had Nextel phones.
Oh yeah.
Wouldn't work because the batteries, would die instantly from the cold. But we had, a pretty good idea when that happened that it was going to be potentially organized crime related, because the storefront was a video gambling machine store, but we didn't know how it would be related. Hard to solve, because we've had, over the years in our office, we've had other organized crime related bombings that were really hard to solve. Nobody talks. So even the owner of the store, so the victim in this instance, was pretty uncooperative from the beginning, tried to say it was, gang related and this and that. So it took about 6 months before we got our first good leads, when a detective from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin called. He was great. And it reminded me, and I don't think he would be offended if I said it was just like out of Fargo. He was like, yeah, hey there, I got this guy.
That's great.
Yeah, so the detective had called Berwyn first, and one of the Berwyn guys called the FBI and they called our office because the detective had arrested one of our co-conspirators on a jewelry store robbery in Fond du Lac. And so he said, I have information that could help the police with the bombing on 16th Street and a bank robbery in Schiller Park. So we're like, okay, well, let's go see what he's got. Anytime we have an explosives related incident or a bombing, we don't always release details to the public just in case someone comes forward. You need that little bit of information to prove that they know, or they would have no other way of knowing. They couldn't read it in the paper, and it helps give them some corroboration. So I went to Wisconsin with an FBI agent, another ATF agent. I actually think it was my husband, the assistant U.S. attorneys from the office, and we interviewed him, and sure enough, he had details that no one would know about the bombing, about the bank robbery. He knew all the players were. He had a lot to lose because this particular guy that got arrested his name was Mark Hay, and he was already on federal supervised release for a bank robbery. And this was like his last chance. So he knew that once he got arrested for this jewelry store robbery in Wisconsin, he was done. Like, he was toast. So he had every incentive in the world to cooperate. So he did, and we were able to use him for a short period of time, making recordings, in particular with a fencing operation in Cicero, at the corner of, is it Roosevelt and Harlem, I think, if memory serves me. It was called Goldberg Jewelers. And he worked in that store. And so they did pretty much run a fencing operation out of there. The main guy that ran that store, his name was Mark Polchan. And Mark also happened to be a member of the outlaw motorcycle gang here. So he was known as the enforcer. But he also had an affiliation with Michael Sarno, who was head of the 26th Street crew. He had known him since he was a kid. And that was kind of where this mingling of the outlaws and the outfit kind of comes in. And the outfit's big business is video gaming devices. And so they make a ton of money there. I don't know do you remember the Family Secrets case that the FBI did? I want to say in and around that time, if we fast forward, our case took 7 years to put together. So we put together, it was a racketeering conspiracy case. We ended up doing a wiretap in Goldberg Jewelers, where we were able to install audio and video in the store in the dark of the night. And at the same time, the trial for Family Secrets was going on. I want to say it was 2007-ish, where they had all the big Chicago mob bosses on trial downtown.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
now I remember.
I did a remarkable, what a case.
Yep, I remember that.
There's a couple great books out, I think, on it too. But so while we were doing ours, that was kind of, going on. Our, doesn't compare to that, but just some of the same players in terms of the video gambling devices were concerned. So it turns out we end up the informant is cooperating with us. At the time we had to get special permission from the courts to use him because he had so many other chances that U.S. probation was like, nope, you can't use him. And we finally had to go to the chief judge because otherwise we might, it's so difficult to solve these crimes. But like as any good informant does, what do they do when you're working with them? He starts committing crime again. So I get a call from the Tinley Park Police Department one day, and they're like, hey, we got this guy doing B&Es, these breaking and enterings, residential burglaries in Orland and Tinley. And, did you know, were you letting him do this? And we're like, no, you can't commit crime while you're working with us. So we lost the utilization of him, but we'd had enough information that we were able to kind of move forward on some of the other defendants. The long of it is that they basically were running that fencing operation out of Goldberg Jewelers. And then their crew of guys were committing burglaries, robberies of residences, commercial jewelry stores, drug dealers, They were also doing interstate. So they were doing these robberies as well in Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin. So we had all the, the interstate we needed, and then proving all of the predicate acts that we needed for the racketeering conspiracy, and to include the bombing then of CNS, coin operated amusements. And it turns out that the owner of that business, he had been moving in on the mob's territory where they had their machines. He would go into their customers, propose a better deal with his machines, and then take the mob's machines out.
Bad idea.
Yeah, it's not a good idea. And he was his own guy. Like this kid had some balls, let's say, to do that, because he wasn't affiliated with anyone. He just had his own thing going.
Did he know who he was messing with?
I think, yes, he did. He did. And then Sarno confronted him twice about it. And then because this kid wouldn't listen, so they sent him a message with the bomb. It was a pipe bomb that they used. They set it on the front, like out in the front of the door. And it was a PVC plastic pipe bomb filled with flash powder. And they got the explosive materials from one of their crew members, who happened to be a really smart dude. That's what's so interesting about these guys sometimes, is that the first guy that started cooperating, that got arrested in Fond du Lac, genius IQ, they're just like almost too smart for their own good. And then the guy that provided the explosives fancied himself, they kind of referred to him as the chemist. Graduated or got his GED in 8th grade. Literally just off the charts smart.
Smart, yeah.
I think some social awkward skills, I would say, and I think he would say the same. Because he ended up eventually cooperating as well. We had some law enforcement people involved as well, sadly, regrettably, helping them evade surveillance, detect our poll cameras, run license plates for the outlaw. We had 2 of them go to prison for a little period of time. One cooperated, one didn't. Others that were involved that we weren't able to eventually wrap up into the case. So we had that piece of it too. Stolen cigarettes, another piece of it. He said, like the bombing, like stolen interstate transportation of stolen goods. He just had regular guys out of that Goldberg Jeweler store that would bring TVs and any kind of appliances, $300 baseball bats, anything they could fence in and out of there. So one of the final things we did too, I think, two of the coolest pieces of this, I should say. One was when we arrested the chemist, the guy that provided the explosives for the bomb, there was an article in the paper that talked about his role and his cooperation, so to speak. And it named individual A, individual B, individual C. And it was enough that it prompted Sarno to show up at Goldberg Jewelers the next day and act in a manner that was different than other days he would show up in there. And Mark Polchin showed him some pieces of paper. There was no discussion. The door was closed, deliberately closed. Sat down on the couch, nothing. Stands back up, hands the papers back. He leaves. Polchin goes into his office, and we hear this noise, and we realize it's the shredder. And we're like, he's shredding whatever's on that paper. So we got a sneak and peek search warrant and went into the business that night. I went in with another FBI agent, or 2 other FBI agents. We went in the middle of the night, and we retrieved the shredded paper from the shred bin, replaced it with other shredded paper, and then we sent that off to Quantico, and they put it all back together. And sure enough, it was the article about the bombing.
That's insane.
I know, isn't that crazy?
I never even heard of a sneak and peek search warrant, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, we had so much to do in terms of just having the wiretap and what that requires in terms of, a court order to be able to do that. Kudos to the FBI for their ability to be able to do that.
How tedious that you have to sit there with shredded paper and try to decipher what was said on this piece of paper. Is that something that you just grab like a cup of coffee, sit down, put on some James Taylor and try to figure this out? Like, that has to be like such a horrible job. Or like, who do you make mad? You know what I mean? Like, who do you make mad to get that job? You know what I mean?
They did a good job, whoever it was.
Yeah, right. Kudos to them. God bless them.
We gave them straight cut paper. It wasn't like the cross cut stuff. I don't know if it was the cross cut stuff.
Right.
Then the second part that ATF that we brought to the table was the undercover part of it. Was we actually we had run out of ways in a sense to get into that inner sanctum of people. And my husband, the great, such a good undercover agent, had a suggestion that we try using one of our agents out of our Savannah office. So he fits the bill in terms of he's an Italian guy originally from New York, and has a legitimate MMA fighting background. And so Mark Polchin, the outlaw, he really fancied wrestling and MMA stuff, hence Goldberg Jewelers, I think, was a WWE guy. Mm-hmm. So did a cold call, and we were like, well, you get one shot at this. Their idea, say it was Chris's idea, my husband's idea, that we bring him gold teeth. Since it's Goldberg Jewelers, it's a pawn shop, they buy and sell gold. So we knew a dentist and purchased some real teeth from the dentist that still had roots on it and everything. Sanitized, but still had blood on them and stuff. But they have a way of like sanitizing them. About like 8 or 10 teeth, I think. Put them in a Crown Royal bag. And he went to the currency exchange first next door. Then he went over there and he was like, he kind of gave him his spiel, and he's tattooed up. He's a big guy, so you're going to be curious and you're dealing with an outlaw. So he was like, do you take these? And he kind of looked at him and he goes, well, you got to take the gold off those teeth. So he slid a hammer out to him, and you have to get buzzed in too. So he gets in the first door and there's all that glass there. And then he's trying to get it off. It doesn't work. And the tooth goes like squirting across the countertop onto the floor. So Polchin looks at him and he's like, give it to me. So he starts cracking him off. He's done this a time or two. And that was that first meeting. And we actually kind of made bets. We were like, whether or not he could get in. The guy's like, your guy's not getting in. And ATF were like, well, our guy's getting in. And he did. He totally got in. He was able to befriend him after that and buy some stolen merchandise from him, spend some time with them. So I want to say that undercover, we did about 9 months of that, where he would come and see him like once a month or, every 2 weeks a month, to kind of seal the deal on some of that stuff. So that was another one. It was a 6-week trial. Holy Moses. It was, I think we started in November. We finished right before Christmas. I think I went home and slept for like 2 weeks after that. But we had 5 defendants on trial, 9 total. So the others, that had either pled or cooperated. All guilty charges. I think Sarno got 25 years. Polchin originally got 60 years. 30 years, there's like a minimum mandatory on the bombing sentence, on the bombing charge. And there's been some court issues since then related to that charge because I had it happen in another case too. So he ended up getting 30 off recently in the last couple of years. And then Sam Volpadesto, who made the bomb, got 30 years. The guy that provided the explosives. And this was all too part of the burglary robbery stuff too. He got 15. So they all got some pretty significant sentences. The guy that provided the video gaming machines, mostly IRS charges. The IRS was a huge component of the case as well. So again, a massive team effort, but like the case agent from the FBI, Courtney, she's one of my best friends. Brenda from the IRS, one of my best friends, lives nearby. So it's always, those cases really bring people together as a team. And it's really, really nice. Great U.S. attorneys, assistant U.S. attorneys on the case too. 3 of them.
Wow.
All good stuff.
So how did you guys end up getting Sarno then? Did someone flip on him?
So we had circumstantial evidence. Like Polchin did not flip. We tried to flip Polchin. We were able to get him to a location where we had like all our stuff in the room, videos playing. And we even brought the undercover in, and he just wouldn't do it. And he was actually kind of crushed when he found out that the agent was an agent because he really thought they were friends. So good work on the undercover's part. And the chemist cooperated. And so he was able to give us a good amount of information on Sarno. The first guy that got arrested for the robberies and jewelries got us a good amount of information in terms of him ordering it. When the owner of the video gambling store finally started cooperating and told us about the 2 visits he got from Sarno, the threats that were made to him, there was that. We also had there's one other person, but we had enough from some of the people that were cooperating. Oh, one of the police officers, actually, it was one of the Berwyn police officers. He was able to give us a good amount of information too. So
That's just fantastic work all the way around.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you spent 27 years at the ATF and you've seen a lot of changes, I'm sure. So what are some of the biggest changes regarding explosive investigations that you've seen over the years?
I would say when we first started doing forensic mapping, so similarly to how they reconstruct traffic accidents, like using the tripod, the total station to map the scene, that using drones to help map the scene, equipment that we can test chemicals and explosive materials on scene, have some idea of what we're looking for before we have to send stuff to the lab. X-rays. In terms of like a bomb technician's world, the ability to use X-ray is like light years ahead of where it used to be. I want to say I made a couple of notes on that too. I think to the cell phone and the video, world and exploitation of that, just whatever videos stuff's in the area, and cell phone stuff is huge. That was nothing I knew, how to do. And that became such a big component of everything we did.
Can you explain a little bit what you mean by that, about the cell phone?
With one of the NRT actually came to our area, Woodridge. There was a big furniture warehouse fire where it just wiped out the entire warehouse, and we had to have one agent dedicated to just looking at all the video stuff and then all the cell phones. So any cell phones that we collected and needed data off of, that they have to download all that data, look at it, or anything tower related, if we need to see where cell phones are pinging or things. There's so much social media, and collecting all that and having to go through all of it, it just takes an enormous amount of time, and you have to have people dedicated to doing just that. When I first started, those were not things, you got muds and toll records, and that was about it, and sifted, looked through them with a highlighter.
I remember that too.
Yeah. Touch DNA, I think, was another one that kind of came to the forefront. We really didn't know what our ability was to get DNA off of something. And one of the serial bombing cases, again, my partner Jane and I had in Downers Grove, there was a bombing at the Hinsdale train station, a pipe bomb in downtown Downers Grove, and then the third one was in Salt Lake City, Utah, that he did. I think ours was the first case in Downers Grove where they actually looked for touch DNA on the pipe itself. We didn't have success, but it's when we figured out that we could actually use the super gluing technique to get fingerprints or things to adhere, like you would a firearm. If you want to try to get fingerprints on it, you can super glue the gun first with that super glue mist, like in a container. I don't know. I think there's a name for that process that escapes me. So I think DNA was a big one that we started looking for in explosives related cases too, as kind of DNA evolved over time. So those are some of the things.
So you were part of the ATF's peer responder program, and you've helped so many fellow agents and other people through some traumatic events. Can you talk us through some of those events that you've helped people through?
I think what's important to remember is that this job can really take a toll on people, and law enforcement does a better job now helping law enforcement build their resilience and their mental armor, so to speak, on the front end of their careers, so that they're not imploding on the back ends of their careers. My husband and I have both been a big part of that. We've done both agents, but we also support the community as well. And I want people to know how important it is when you're there for people, just how much that means to them. You never know sometimes the impact you're going to have on someone's life or well-being by just being there for them or just giving them a listening ear. So, and one example I'll give is, I was really privileged to be able to respond to the West Texas fertilizer plant explosion. I believe that was 2013. And we did peer support for the first responders there. And, there were 12 people lost, 12 first responders, and they've become friends. We stay in touch. We do stay in touch with them. One of my cohorts that was with me on that response, Josie, he stays in touch with them quite a bit. I mean, more than I do. But the lasting impact that you can have supporting people in their times of need is just, it's a huge part of the job. It's something that I do translate into the police commission work that I do too. Like that, it's important that the officers know that we're there for them because of the stigma that sometimes still exists in that regard, or the feelings of, shame or embarrassment that might come with it, that they need to know that you're there for them no matter what. So it's nice when people support their police officers, because it's not like people are calling 911 to tell you to have a nice day or wish you a happy birthday. They're calling you in their worst days. There are times of need, and that wears on you after time. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts sometimes. So I really do appreciate the people that reach out to law enforcement people to tell them that they care.
Yeah, absolutely. That goes such a long way. And just knowing that, that there's somebody out there that they could reach out to and that they're not alone, that's saving lives left and right. And officers and first responders need to know that. So with everything that's going on in the world today, can you give people advice who might be out in crowds, who might be out in public, something that they could look for to maybe observe any possible explosives if they're out with their families, if they're out in public somewhere, maybe big crowds? What are some tips that you can give people to be aware of?
I think that we all see events that happen in the news, especially now when you're in big crowds, as you mentioned. So if they're considered soft targets, so they're more vulnerable than if you're somewhere where they can lock the venue or the event down. For law enforcement, it's easy to say, like, we just have a heightened sense of awareness and a heightened sense of vigilance, that we're always kind of looking around, scanning, looking for something that's out of the ordinary. We're looking for our exits. How do I get out of this situation? And I can't impress upon people enough, and I don't feel like I'm saying anything new, but it's being aware of your surroundings and not oblivious to what's going on around you, and paying attention. Explosive devices are really limited to only the imagination of the bomber. So you never know what it's going to look like, so to speak. But if you see something, laying around, whether it's a backpack or a box or something that's just maybe a little out of the ordinary, that maybe shouldn't, might not be there, then you might want to bring someone's attention to it. A law enforcement officer that's in the area, or security person, something like that. I mean, I still pay attention to nationwide threats, global threats, and through both the organization, IABTI, information there. There's also the U.S. Bomb Tech Association. I know those guys have got it going on. They do a ton of training, especially interoperability training with the military and stuff. So everybody's kind of on the same page as far as response. We just really encourage people to kind of pay attention to their surroundings awareness. And it's kind of like, what is that Mike Tyson thing? Everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face. It's that typical thing. And it's also like, you already want to have a plan in your head. So when shit hits the fan, you're implementing your plan, you're executing your plan, and not trying to figure it out, right then. So it's kind of like a mental preparation thing for wherever you're going. But
the other thing I try to tell, my wife, my kids, my friends who weren't in law enforcement is watch people's eyes, watch people's hands. If someone's moving with intention, and what I mean by that is just something out of the ordinary that catches your eye about something. If somebody's up to something that might be malicious, they're on a mission. They're looking at what they want to do. They're looking through you. Yeah. And all it does is it just takes a second to kind of be, like you said, be aware of your surroundings. And if something doesn't feel right and those spidey senses are going off, do not ignore that. I try to tell my kids that, especially listen to that. Don't suppress that. And like I said, the eyes will tell you what someone's intentions are, and their hands. Like I said, those are the two big things that I believe saved my life in my career several times, are people's eyes and their hands. So just be aware. If those spidey senses start going off, listen to them.
That's a huge one. Trusting that gut, man. Excellent points about the hands and eyes. That behavior and the gut. Man, people don't trust their spidey instincts enough. They always
Yeah,
kind of push them aside, like, so no.
I agree. And you don't have to be a first responder. You know what I mean? Everybody gets these spidey senses and everybody gets that weird feeling. And 99% of the time, you're right. And it doesn't matter what situation you're in. You know, if it doesn't, you know, whatever situation you're in, listen to it. Tina, I just wanted to say thank you for your service. I just wanted to say thank you for all the hard work that you've done in your 27-year career. I also wanted to thank your husband for his great service and everybody that you've worked with. You guys did some amazing work over the years. So great job.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it and speak with you.
Of course. And thank you so much for your time. And I'll, again, please like and subscribe my channel, and I'll put all my information down in the description.